Well, welcome everyone today for our this is a very exciting program. I'd like to introduce to you, we have Bill Dedman, one of the lead reporters on Newsday's undercover investigation of racial steering by real estate agents. He has designed a hidden camera project called Long Island Divide, which showed agents reinforcing racial segregation through illegal steering of home buyers. The project has launched investigation by state and federal authorities and several steps by the National Association of Realtors to increase awareness of fair housing issues. Newsday's team received several national awards for their work, including a Peabody Award. Long Island Divide and its 40-minute documentary film, Testing the Divide, is available online. Bill is a Pulitzer Prize-winning investigative reporter and #1 best-selling author of the biography Empty Mansions. He received the 1989 Pulitzer Prize in investigative reporting for his work at the Atlanta Journal-Constitution on The Color of Money, his series on racial discrimination by home lenders in middle-income Black neighborhoods. The Color of Money led to an expanded federal laws on disclosure of loan data, new financing for middle-income homebuyers, and greater awareness of systematic discrimination. He has spoken on fair housing and fair lending issues for the National Association of Realtors, the Federal Reserve, and many financial associations. Today, Bill is going to address for us how the test of real estate agents were conducted, the major findings, and what agents can do to ensure fair treatment of consumers, and what training resources are available. Please join me in welcoming Bill Dedman. Thank you.
Thank you, Katie. Thank you very much. I'm excited to have this opportunity to share with you our Newsday newspaper's team effort on fair housing. Thank you so much for inviting me. It's gratifying. It's sort of surprising that so many real estate associations around the country have responded to a newspaper's investigation and are using it to provoke an important conversation. So we can dive into looking together at some clips of our Newsday video of agents in action, perhaps not on their best days. And we can talk about what agents can say about schools and about new training available. I'm hoping that this session will be helpful for you and challenging, something for you to think about and to take action on.
And I understand you won the Pulitzer Prize for an investigation into mortgage lending practices. I thought it might be interesting for our viewers to hear a brief summary of your investigation. And how does that investigation compare to this one?
Well, Katie, the stories in the Atlanta newspapers you mentioned were called The Color of Money. They're online. They were about redlining, the practice of mortgage lenders doing business on one part of the map, but not another. This was back in the late 1980s. Redlining had gotten a lot of attention earlier, but seemed to be thought of as something from the past. We found lenders were making home loans in white areas, even the lower income white areas, but not in Black areas of Atlanta, even the higher income areas that were home to Coretta Scott King and the vice presidents at Coca-Cola and Delta Airlines. A couple of things resonate from that experience. First, the customer would have no way to know where the banks didn't make loans. And therefore, the customer would have no basis for making a complaint. We looked at how the banks operated. For example, we found differences in which real estate agents the banks marketed to, and even where customers could put in a loan application. One lesson I think we learned there was that small actions, perhaps unintentional ones, could have a huge impact in perpetuating a segregated system. And I'd like to mention a more recent project for the Boston Globe, looking at traffic stops in Massachusetts. Our series was called Speed Trap. An interesting thing about being stopped by an officer for speeding is that pretty much all of us were speeding. But some get a ticket and some get a warning. And how do you know if you're being treated equally? It's similar to being a bank customer or a real estate customer. You have no way to know whether you're treated the same as everyone else. And therefore, you would have no reason to complain. What we found was that in Massachusetts, who gets a ticket and who gets a warning is easy to predict if you know the race, sex, and age of the driver. For example, women much more often got a warning, especially younger women. Up to about age 40, it's the same as who gets roles in Hollywood. Minorities almost always got the ticket, especially Black and Latino men. So there seemed to be some racial profiling at work in that officer's decision made at the window. Again, the customer would have no way to know. Maybe even the officer wouldn't know. But as with home mortgages, the public records gave us the pattern of what was happening, and then we tried to dig into how is it happening. I think what's different about our project, Long Island Divided, is that we're not coming along later, looking at records. With the video cameras, you can watch people violate the law. And I think it really matters that you can see specific agents and the names of their companies, as we all know from recent experience, and that, you know, if it's on video, it may need to be on video for people to believe it. And seeing those agents and the names of their companies may have helped lead to a greater impact and possibility for changing the system.
The Newsday investigation has become the most prominent example of the existence of race-based bias in real estate. Why did Newsday start the investigation in the beginning?
So to set the scene, Katie, Long Island stretches east of New York City 100 miles with 2 counties and almost 3 million people in a heavily segregated suburb of New York City, perhaps the most heavily segregated in the nation. What we mean by that is there's a lot of diversity overall with people from all races and nationalities, but especially African Americans are concentrated in very few communities. Out of more than 200 communities on Long Island, a majority of the Black residents live in only 8. And we had heard anecdotes all through the years from Black home buyers who had had problems trying to shop for a home in a whiter or somewhat integrated residential area. And we'd heard this even from our own colleagues at the newspaper. So we decided to follow the methods used by fair housing agencies and sometimes state regulators, sending out testers, with the addition of hidden cameras for video and audio. That's legal in New York. And it's legal in most states, including Iowa. Most state laws require only one party to a conversation, and that can be the home buyer or the tester, to consent to audio recording. But a legal note, hidden audio recording is not allowed in about a dozen states. And Illinois is, well, it's sort of a puzzle. Illinois is often listed as one of those that forbids hidden recording. It has a law, but a court found that law to be unconstitutional. So consult your attorney. Still, testing can happen everywhere with or without recording. Testers can be debriefed, and we can look at the listings that they were given. Now, let me show you an introductory part of our documentary film. The project is called Long Island Divided. We call it the film part, Testing the Divide. What happened in this video clip surprised us, but we saw it over and over. One customer receives service from an agent, while another customer in the same circumstance is refused service.
If agents are courteous and professional, how can you know that they're treating you equally compared with someone of a different race or ethnicity?
I have to say it without saying it, you know.
Behind smiles and handshakes, How do you know if they're giving you fewer options or suggesting different
I'm
areas?
not going to send you anything you want to do unless you don't want to start your car to buy your flat.
Or that rules don't apply to you and another home buyer in the same way? Long Island is one of America's most segregated suburbs. Newsday set out to discover what role real estate agents might play in keeping it that way, potentially affecting the quality of lives.
Technically, as a real estate agent, we shouldn't tell the buyers.
In house hunting, it's nearly impossible to see evidence of hidden discrimination. You would never know unless you go undercover.
In one test, Johnny Mae Alston was the black tester and Cindy Parry was the white tester. And they met with Anne-Marie Quealy-Bichon at Signature Premier Properties office in Cold Spring Harbor. They asked for the same thing. As often happens, the agent discussed getting pre-qualified or pre-approved for a mortgage by a bank, showing how much a buyer can spend on a house.
Pre-qualified, I guess. My husband's working with somebody in a bank. We've done some preliminary talks, about getting pre-approved.
Neither had been pre-approved or pre-qualified. Here's what the agent told the black tester.
So I really need that. I won't take out any money unless I do have a pre-qualification limit. So I need to. So that means I can't pre-qualify for a mortgage. Oh, so that means I can't go out to see anything. I won't do it. You can try another person, but I don't have the time.
And without pre-approval, here's what the agent told the white tester.
What is your availability? When can you start looking at houses? I would say not this coming week.
Cindy received 79 listings from this agent. Johnny Mae couldn't get any listings. And Cindy, the white tester, received 2 home tours. They had the same finances, the same budget, and they made the same request in the same area. But one was white, the other was black. The agent treated them differently.
Would you please give us an example or the summary of the test and who was tested and what the outcome was, please?
Yes. Katie, our Newsday team focused on home sales, sending out first-time home buyers. We'd send a white home buyer and then an Asian home buyer, or white and then black, or white and then Hispanic. And we'd mix up who would go first to see the agent. The home buyers gave the agent the same circumstances, first-time home buyers, so selling another property was not involved. We chose testers of the same gender and roughly the same age. We dressed them in the same business casual style. We bought shirts for the men. I went shopping at Nordstrom for similar purses for the women. They asked for the same number of bedrooms and had the same family size, and they were prepared to give the same income and same credit scores, but rarely were asked for any financial information other than mortgage pre-approval status, as you saw, on which they were identical. We shop for houses from entry level. Now, in New York City area prices, entry level is about $400,000 to the high end, $7 million. $7 million won't get you Alec Baldwin's house in the Hamptons, but it'll get you into his neighborhood. But always the same price range for both testers in a pair. And they saw the same agent. Now, that wouldn't be necessary for a fair housing investigation or fair housing lawsuit. Under the law, 2 different agents at the same brokerage are also supposed to treat customers equally. But we thought it would be more fair and more persuasive to have the same agent see both customers. How did we pick the agents? We didn't. The brokerages picked which agents would be tested, though they didn't know it. Whoever was on the board to handle walk-ins or phone calls or internet contacts, that's who we tested. We did 86 of these matched paired tests at 12 companies, 12 brands that together represent more than half of the sellers in our market. Familiar names: Coldwell Banker, Keller Williams, Century 21, Remax, as well as large regional brands. Then our team reviewed more than 200 hours of videos to see how the customers were treated and analyzed thousands of listings to see what school districts and communities they were given. We did not feel comfortable being the referees, so we had two fair housing experts review each test for equal treatment. One had run a testing program for the Department of Justice, and the other is the law professor who wrote the textbook on fair housing law. Only if both of our referees independently threw a flag did we call a penalty on an agent. But we didn't publish yet. Before we published, we gave the agents and their brokers enough details so they could come in to watch the videos if they wanted and could respond to our findings. So this was a careful effort. It took more than 3 years. This is not a drive-by investigation. Now, the results. The agents gave unequal treatment in 40% of our tests. And the results varied in interesting ways. First, Asian buyers were treated differently than their white counterparts 19% of the time, so 2 out of 10 on average. Hispanic buyers were treated differently than their white counterparts 39% of the time, 4 out of 10. And Black buyers were treated differently than their white counterparts 49% of the time, 5 out of 10. Most of the attention has been on that high difference for Black customers, and that makes sense. But don't lose sight of the rest. If 4 out of 10 Hispanic buyers, if 2 out of 10 Asian buyers are being treated poorly, half a century after the civil rights laws were passed, those seem like high numbers as well. We viewed this as testing the gatekeepers in real estate to see how they perform. 2 out of the 12 companies passed all of their tests. Those were 2 of the smallest regional brands. It's fair to say that most of these major national and regional real estate companies were contributing to the racial segregation in our suburbs. I guess you have to ask yourself, would the results be any different if we repeated the test this weekend in your communities? If 4 retired police officers from Chicago came with their family and they're shopping for homes, 1 white, 1 Black, 1 Asian, 1 Hispanic, would they go home at the end of the weekend with the same listings? Now, what sort of differences did we see? First, we saw steering. Agents directed 1 out of 4 of our minority home buyers into different communities and different school districts altogether than their white counterparts. We also saw differences in how buyers were screened. 1 minority buyer would be asked for ID, but the same agent would not ask the white buyer for ID. Some agents wouldn't help our Black or Hispanic buyer at all unless they signed an exclusive contract with that brokerage, but didn't require a contract of the white buyer. And then we were surprised by inappropriate comments by agents. You know, minority buyers were not subjected to racial comments or inappropriate remarks. And we're past the days of signs saying whites only. People got smiles and handshakes. But it was the white buyers who heard inappropriate comments about race and schools. Here's a video clip that highlights that problem of inappropriate comments.
Our community came in, and they really took over spraying us in the Northwest Woods area.
Here, an agent gives conflicting advice about Freeport.
Now you have a bad school district, and
school bus, see the moms that are hanging out on the corners.
But you don't want to go there. It's a mixed neighborhood. Should be the United Nations.
Because you might be more comfortable in a certain demographic area that isn't heavily one way or another in terms of that. Bayshore has two school districts, Brentwood and Bayshore. You don't want to have Brentwood School District. You want to have Bayshore School District. I can't say anything, but I encourage you, I want you to go there at 10 o'clock at night with your wife, buy documents. Go to that 7-Eleven. They didn't buy there.
No, that's great.
I have to say it without saying it, you have the knowledge of the areas.
Yes.
I don't want to use the word steer, but I try to, I'll use the word, I educate every areas,
Yeah. How are you, Russ? Hey, Russ. Good. How are you? We're either waiting for the owner or waiting for the agent to show up.
You don't want to be, I don't think you should be in Elmont. I think you should probably just be Franklin Square.
And I remember specifically, he talked about steering.
Yes, that's what he said. Steering, yes.
Yeah. And in the same breath, he mentioned, well, steering's bad, but this is what I'm going to do.
There's something called steering. Steering, like steering.
Oh, like a car or something?
No, like a horse,
It seems that some agents may have gotten a message through the years that complying with the fair housing laws is some sort of political correctness, that it means not saying the wrong thing or not saying the wrong thing to the wrong person who might complain about it. Our tests suggest that we need more attention to steering and to differential treatment on what agents do and not just what they say. And are they giving the same advice to all clients? Are they treating all clients equally?
Yes, we've been talking a lot about steering. What forms did this unequal treatment, in what forms did it take?
Yes. Well, steering is sort of an imprecise term, Katie. I admit I sometimes use it too much as a catch-all for various behaviors. Telling one person that there is no housing in an area in their price range, but showing housing in that price range in that area to others. We saw that happen. That's steering. Making unsolicited comments about the race or ethnicity or religion of people who live in an area, or comments about the schools, comments about crime or resale values as a way of encouraging or usually discouraging someone from living there. That's steering, especially while giving contrary information or being silent on those matters with a different customer. We heard agents, you saw an example, tell the white buyer to avoid an area because of poor resale values, while encouraging the minority buyer to look there. We also saw differences in the level of service. Overall, our white testers got 50% more listings than their black counterparts. Now, we've been discussing this in terms of individual buyers, but look at it neighborhood by neighborhood for a moment. Both testers would ask for an area, let's say within half an hour of downtown. And that area, that circle, would include many communities or neighborhoods or school districts. But sometimes in the wider residential areas within that circle, listings would be given only to our white buyer. So the minority buyer was steered around those communities. That's what we were testing for. And then we had something we didn't expect. We had minority communities within that circle where homes are for sale in the price range, where no one of either race got any listings in those minority areas, although homes are for sale. These are the communities with more than a modest amount of Black population. The agents were steering around those for all buyers. Our legal experts said, well, wait, who has the lawsuit in that case? Lots of people do. Not only are the white and minority home buyers being steered illegally, they can sue the brokerages, but the communities themselves are being harmed, the governments. And anyone who has tried to sell a home in those areas and their listing brokers have a lawsuit under the Fair Housing Act against the brokerages that are steering around their communities. You know that fewer buyers means lower home values, lower appraisals, lower home equity, and less tax money for schools. Here's a video clip with a classic example of steering. An agent tells one man and his family that an area would be a good place to live with the nicest neighbors, while the agent warns another man and his family that it's a dangerous place.
Kelvin Toon is a black man in his early 50s, and he went in to meet with an agent involving a test in the Brentwood community, a community that is 80% Hispanic and black. The agent communicated to Kelvin, our black tester, that she enjoyed meeting with clients from the Brentwood area.
Every time I get a new listing in Brentwood or a new client, I get so excited because they're the nicest people.
When we sent Kelvin's counterpart in to meet with the same agent, the white tester was actually warned about Brentwood not being a nice place.
The nursing home we need to be near is in Brentwood.
Okay.
And so we found a couple that are in Brentwood.
Pretty close to each other.
Okay. And it just seemed like those would be handy also for going.
Do you want to give me them and I'll look into them for you? Or?
Yeah, I can do that.
That warning came later to the white tester saying there was concern about gang activity going on in Brentwood. This agent wanted the white tester to know, but that information wasn't provided to Kelvin, the black tester. The listings centered black tester Kelvin in Brentwood with 27 house listings, while the white tester got 0 listings in Brentwood and was directed towards much whiter neighborhoods.
Do you think the agents included in this documentary were knowingly steering? Some mentioned that they shouldn't be saying what they're saying. Do you think that maybe this is an unconscious bias?
I think this is an important question, Katie, but difficult to answer. Let's try to tease it out. The first point is that it doesn't matter. The Fair Housing Act and your state and local laws cover behavior, not thoughts or motives. The law is not a mind reader. If an agent is treating one person better than another similarly situated person, and the difference between them is one of the 7 categories in the Fair Housing Act, the agent and the agent's broker have violated the law. To remind you, those categories are color, race, religion, national origin, disability, sex, and family status, usually meaning having children or being pregnant. You also may have state and local laws that could include marital status, sexual orientation, and other categories. Now, it is interesting to speculate about the motivations of the agents. If you want to stop something from happening, you have to consider, why is it happening? Some agents may, in effect, be profiling or assuming that the person of color can't really afford homes in that price range, or can't qualify for the mortgage, or will be wasting their time, while accepting the same price range without question from a white buyer. One of the tricky things about profiling is that it doesn't work. We usually talk about profiling as though it's a shortcut to success. TV has trained us to think of FBI profilers, but maybe profiling is some sort of politically incorrect thing, people might think. But the experts say the real problem with profiling is that it is so ineffective. Let's say you want to stop school shootings from happening. Who plays video games or dresses a certain way is not a good predictor of who will be a school shooter. the profile you see fits too many good kids and may miss the kid who's planning an attack. What is a better predictor? Acquiring weapons, telling other students of plans, don't be in the cafeteria on Thursday. Or think about airport safety. Religion of the passenger is not a good way to identify who will be a terrorist. You waste too much investigative resources on the wrong people, and you might miss the people you should be paying attention to. And in real estate, race is not a good way to identify which customers can afford a home. You leave too much money on the table if you assume that people of color can't be good customers. Besides, it's illegal. So why do it? Some agents may think, consciously or not, that they'll make money faster with less effort if they show people homes where you'll feel comfortable. We heard an agent say something very close to that. But why assume that people want segregated neighborhoods? Besides, it's illegal. Some agents may not have any sort of bias or expectation, but may be bowing to bias that they think others may have. Maybe agents fear that sellers would be angry if they brought minority buyers to their home, or that the neighbors who are potential customers in the future as seller might be upset if an agent was seen to be helping integrate an area. Or agents could think that appraisers or lenders might be biased. And there's recent evidence for discrimination in appraisal and lending. That would make it harder to close the sale. But again, none of that matters because steering is illegal. I suppose it's possible that somewhere a few agents may be prejudiced. I assume that that is a tiny group, so small as to be irrelevant to our discussion. As others have said, there's so much steering going on that the good agents have to be doing it too. You can't account for it by outright prejudice. You know, in general, on issues of race, it's pretty easy to apply all the heat to the question, who's the bigot? Who in our office might be prejudiced? It's not very productive. It might be more productive to apply light to the question, how do we do things in our office? How might some differences creep in? Is what we're doing sure to treat people equally? Because under the law, it's what you do that counts. I think it's also interesting to consider the point of view of the home buyer, even if in our case, they were actors testing the agents. Now, our testers often came back from the real estate office to the newspaper office telling us, that agent was so nice, she was so helpful. They only learned the truth when our team brought the two buyers together to watch videos and look at the listings they were given. Here's a clip where you'll meet some of the testers and also hear from a fair housing expert who works with them.
It almost makes me wish that the racism is more explicit so that I would know about it.
Too often I hear people who maybe aren't as familiar with this kind of work say, oh, well, they were just testers. But all you have to do is tell someone, which I have to do on a fairly regular basis, that you were turned down because of your race, and tell them the circumstances that occurred on a particular test. And you will see just how real and painful that injury is.
Elmont, you know, it's okay, it's good, you're very close to the city. Some of them are not as nice, Elmont.
I do remember him, he was nice, and I do remember him pointing out on the map.
Oh, he loved that map.
Yeah, like he had the map, and he's like, you know.
Some of these towns, in my opinion, are not necessarily the greatest in terms of school districts, safety, crime, resale.
You know, one of the patterns that startled us was that some agents, began their presentations to the buyers. These were new customers, after all, with inappropriate comments or information that violates the Fair Housing Act. This agent with the map, he looked like General Patton planning the invasion of Sicily, but he had a different invasion plan for home buyers of different races. For the whites, it was don't get off the highway until you get past these neighborhoods. Note that it just didn't seem to be offhand, casual comments. It seemed to be the sales pitch, the standard guidance for narrowing your home search. I hate to say it, but for these agents, it seemed that steering was part of the service that they were selling.
What roles do schools play in the action of agents?
Well, Katie, I don't know how it works in your area, but we heard agents in New York explain to our buyers over and over, everything is by schools. Agents would tout one district over another. Some districts were blue ribbon and others were declining. Often they gave different information to different buyers. Notice that American school districts are so segregated by race in many communities across the nation that directing someone to a certain school area is the same as directing them to an area with a higher or lower minority population, even if race isn't mentioned. America's schools are more segregated now than they were 30 years ago. It's hard to believe. School segregation and housing segregation are intertwined. Now, around the country, some agents have picked up the idea that, well, we can't talk about schools at all. You may have heard agents say, I can't mention schools, but the Fair Housing Act doesn't say that. Agents can give straightforward, factual information. Agents can answer questions. Agents can refer customers to flyers or brochures or news organizations or websites with information about schools. The problem arises when the agents are picking and choosing different districts for different customers, or making comments about the demographics in schools or quality of schools to steer customers. Here's a discussion of schools from our video, and you'll hear from the law professor who was an advisor on our project.
I said, do you really want your future children going to Amityville School District?
We're going to try and stay away from Freeport, Roosevelt, Hempstead for now because of the school district.
This part, the Salisbury part, is in demand because the schools are much, much, much better.
In Newsday's 86-pair test, agents often applied a laser-like focus on school districts, highlighting their perceived quality when recommending places that house hunters should consider buying or avoid. Fair housing experts say touting or disparaging school districts can put agents in jeopardy because talking about school districts can be taken as a euphemism for race.
There's a few districts that I know I would I won't look in those towns.
Oh, okay.
You know, like Freeport and Baldwin and Amityville, which is part of Massapequa schools, but it's just certain parts of Massapequa.
If the customer asked about the quality of the schools and the agent responded with accurate information, I think the agent would be fine. The problem with talking about differentials in schools is that at least in the last 10 or 15 years, that has been a proxy for race. They don't mention the race of the community. Good schools are available in these areas. Those areas I'd stay away from because they have poor schools. I want to ask, did you tell that to the other tester? If you're only giving that information to one tester of the two, and the only difference is the race, then you've provided what I call differential service.
The only one, if you're in Massapequa, you only want school district 23. Okay. You don't want 6 in Massapequa because that's 6 in Amityville, and you're not going to like those schools.
This agent making the list there helpfully made a list for each of our buyers and then sent the buyers back to the Newsday office with different lists of schools. Schools are the hardest part of this, so let's think through this together. How do you discuss school quality without violating the Fair Housing Act and without perpetuating segregated schools? First, you understand that you don't have to talk about race to be steering. You all understand that if the districts vary in race and you're promoting one over another, you're steering, especially if you give different information to different buyers or are silent with one buyer. And so what should agents do? The standard advice seems to be to limit your information to answering factual questions. But stay away from the trap of using labels such as good or nice or high performing or other vague terms. To be honest, realtors are not experts in schools and don't know which schools are high performing. Let's talk about school test scores. Is it okay to share websites with objective information? Yes, it's legal. So is it okay to talk about school test scores? Well, write this on the blackboard 100 times. School test scores don't tell you how good a school is. School test scores don't tell you how good a school is. School test scores tell you mostly how wealthy and educated are the parents who send their kids to that school. Wealth and education of parents is a very good predictor of their children's test scores. And race in America is a pretty good predictor of wealth and education. So you see the problem. It's self-perpetuating. A high-performing school may just be a wealthier area. And a school with lower test scores might actually be the higher performing one, where good teachers are bringing up the scores of students who are growing up with fewer advantages. Just recently, greatschools.org, the school ranking website that so many agents refer customers to, has realized this pitfall. It's changing its ratings, especially in states where it was basing the ratings entirely on test scores. It realized we're just perpetuating segregation. NAR has spoken up in favor of this change. So, can you talk about school test scores and refer parents to websites listing them? Yes, you can, legally. But you might consider if it's right to do this in a country as segregated as ours. Well, we can stop pretending that school test scores tell us how good a school is. The National Association of Realtors says it's working on trying to give you better guidance about schools and advice you can give, starting with a film that will come out later this year. So watch for that.
What was the reaction from the real estate industry and government?
Well, I guess it's fair to say that we raised some awareness of these issues. Often I'm asked what happened to the agents in these videos. We know that disciplinary hearings for the agents are continuing, and there are, once you count the agents involved, and then there are brokers, and often there's more than one broker of record, you get close to 100 people who are facing some disciplinary action from the state. And there was one agent we know who voluntarily gave up her license when the disciplinary process began, just one. And so we'll see if anything happens to the others. The agents and the brokers were already called to testify in public before a state Senate committee hearing. They were sworn in, they were asked questions. The agent who said, follow the school bus, you heard her say, see which mothers are waiting to meet the bus. She said, well, she just meant for the customers to learn where the bus routes were. The agent who said, the Hispanics are taking over our neighborhood, he said he meant that in a positive way. The most surprising part of the hearing was that the brokers all said that they had reviewed the tests and found nobody did anything wrong. Their position seemed to be that if steering wasn't announced, if someone didn't say, I'm now going to be violating the law and steering based on race, then it wasn't illegal. But you know better, and the senators knew better. After the hearing, the New York State Senate unanimously approved changes to state law, and action in the state assembly is coming up next. Let me show you those changes, because changes in state law tend to creep from state to state. Now, these pass half of the legislature in New York, and we're expecting action soon in the General Assembly. It seems that they're going to pass. And one senator said, essentially what we've done is we've taken Newsday's investigation and we've pieced it apart and turned it into state laws. So let's go through what those are. First, there's more testing coming. And it's not being done by the state department that regulates real estate. It's being done by the Attorney General's office. Adding fees for brokers and salespeople when they renew their licenses to pay for that testing. Requiring standard procedures for client intake, collecting demographic information about customers, new customers, collecting information about what properties they're shown. Training. The training in New York was pretty poor and slipshod, jokey, and they're trying to improve the training. Damages available to victims and doubling the fines on those who discriminate. Where do the fines go? To pay for more testing. And this next item really has to do with supervision. An associate broker who's an office manager is liable, in effect, for actions done by salespeople in that office. And then requiring all the housing agencies in the state to try to make steps that will further fair housing and reduce segregation. So, if you want to stop speeding, you'll add some enforcement, and it has a deterrent effect on others. And that seems to be the idea. Also, at the federal level, HUD, the Department of Housing and Urban Development, has already begun to resume enforcement of the Fair Housing Act under the new president and new HUD secretary. So we'll see probably swift changes at the federal level too.
So based on your investigations, what do you think are the best ways to combat racism in real estate?
Well, Katie, let's talk about some fixes. The National Association of Realtors has responded vigorously to our investigation. It has a new program called ACT, A for accountability, C for culture change, T for training. Let's go through that quickly. Accountability. NAR is working with state associations to examine state licensing laws and point out where the enforcement of fair housing provisions is weak. That's entirely new. The state association making recommendations for tougher state laws. NAR also has a voluntary program of self-testing, helping companies that want to test their agents for compliance with fair housing laws. You might think, well, there wouldn't be any such companies. The CEO of Realogy, which owns Century 21 and Coldwell Banker and Sotheby's International, said, yes, we should be testing our own agents. And NAR said, well, we'll work with you. We'll help make that possible and connect you with groups to help with the testing. So that's accountability. C is for culture change. You probably know that the fair housing is now a core component of the Realtor Code of Ethics. You may not be old enough to remember that from the 1920s to the 1960s, the Realtor Code of Ethics prohibited selling a home in a white neighborhood to a person of color. And it even continued into the 70s with code words about anyone who might be detrimental to the neighborhood. So let's acknowledge that cultures can be changed, and change may take a long time. There's a long tradition of laws in America that gave us redlining, blockbusting, racial covenants on deeds, predatory subprime lending that stripped home equity out of minority neighborhoods. We're not saying that real estate agents created segregation, but it does appear that there's been a long history of contributing to segregation. And when we think about culture change, many of you saw last fall that NAR made a public apology for its century of contributing to segregation. And it was interesting to watch the chatter about this on some agent Twitter feeds and Facebook pages where some agents said, I don't understand. What is it we're apologizing for? So culture change may take a long time. And the effects of segregation carry down from generation to generation, starting with the differences in wealth creation. We all know that home equity is the money that the grandkids use for college. So ACT, T for training. New York has bolstered its classes. NAR has started 2 new training efforts. The first is Fairhaven. Many of you have tried it now. It's a game or simulation, takes about an hour, where you play the agent or you might play the buyer, and you're trying to close deals and you run into some fair housing issues and pitfalls. It's really well done, I think, and it's trying to teach the law and empathy. So give it a try. It takes about an hour. If you give the wrong answers, you get more information because it diverts you and you learn more. The second thing is that NAR this spring will roll out a course on implicit bias in real estate, how to recognize it. And it will be a 3-hour course for brokers. It's designed for the brokers to take it and then teach the course or lead a discussion of the course with their agents. Both of these things seem like useful attempts. Also, NAR has new programs to recognize what it calls fair housing champions, people who obey the law and prosper while doing it. I do realize that quality control is difficult in an industry where people are independent. Agents are self-motivated, working from home, as we all are, or some are part-time. We would discuss as journalists watching our testers come back from the test, how hard would it be in a brokerage to stop steering from happening? We're lay people, but we ask about that. It seems clear that saying we respond to complaints is not sufficient because no one would know to complain. It did appear to us that the agents in our tests didn't have rigorous standards for what they do and don't do with every customer. There didn't seem to be a checklist. One customer would get a fat folder of information and one would get a skinny folder from the same agent. That seems like something you could fix. More diversity in the workforce seems like it might help, but it wouldn't be a cure-all. We saw steering by agents of all backgrounds. It seems that being more familiar with minority neighborhoods would be helpful. There seemed to be steering around communities for so long that there was no awareness at all of the nice new homes on the waterfront in that community. And there did not seem to be real estate offices from these major companies in any of the communities with significant minority population. Those seem like things you could fix. I wonder about the role of brokers, whether brokers are checking what listings the agents give to customers, what neighborhoods, what schools. At that moment in the MLS where the agent is generating listings to be emailed to the customer and clicking specific communities or distance from here to there or school districts, that's the moment where the steering is happening. Does your MLS send you monthly reports that would give you enough information to ask, why did we go here and not there? Are you demanding that of your MLS? Do you have consistent ways of qualifying customers? Do you ask the same information of everyone or no one? I assume that all of you want to obey the law. So the hard part may be recognizing where the gaps are, how some discrimination, some differences can come in. Let me close with this thought. NAR suggests 2 sort of straightforward ideas for avoiding steering. 1, provide customers with listings based on their objective criteria, home size, other attributes, not on vague terms of your own or from the customer, like nice neighborhood or good schools or safe. And second, pay attention to unconscious bias. When evaluating what listings you're giving, ask yourself, why may I have eliminated certain areas? Now, I'm a layman, but I have a question. Aren't those 2 pieces of advice somewhat contradictory? If we give customers only listings based on their objective criteria, why would we be eliminating areas that meet those criteria at all? In other words, if we gave every customer access to all the listings within their price range with the right number of bedrooms, we wouldn't have steering. It may be that the best way to stop illegal steering may be to stop steering customers at all. So I guess my question for you is, why not send them all the listings? Here's my hope. I hope that you'll share our stories and our 40-minute film with everyone in your office and with your customers. It's called Long Island Divided, and the address we'll put in the chat is simply newsday.com/divided. Have a movie night when we can all get back together. Post it on Facebook, but don't stop there. What I hope is you'll have a conversation. Okay, everyone has a goal of treating everyone equally. Now, what specific steps can we take in our office to make sure that that happens? I appreciate you inviting me to meet with you. I hope this has given you something to discuss with your colleagues and your customers, and I'm hoping that you have other questions that we can take up.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Patty, do we have any questions in the chat at all that we could present?
Don't be shy.
Lots of thank you.
I have none right now.
Oh.
Well, let me just mention one thing that comes up a lot. It's the idea that you want to please your customer and you're trying to compete with internet services. And I understand the business can be difficult. And so the customer might tempt you into steering. The customer may ask you inappropriate advice, right? You've all experienced that. And you want to help the customer as much as possible. I just want to sort of encourage the idea of pushing back against the customer and letting them know that there are laws. You can mention that there are fair housing laws and that you have to obey them. If the plumber who's coming to work at my house next week told me I can't do it that way, I'd have to use this material because there's a building code, I would accept that. It's a building code, of course. Okay, I didn't know. They're the professional, they know. And you're the professionals and you're regulated by laws. And it's okay to say to the customer, well, now that's an area I can't give you any guidance on. I can't help you with that. If they were buying a boat, they'd go do their own homework. And it's okay to say to them, you need to go visit school districts. You need to go tour the communities and decide where you want to live. You'll figure out what's important to you. I'm going to send you all the listings that meet the criteria you've given me. You decide which ones you want to go visit. I just sort of want to buck you up to this idea that it's okay to push back.
Well, I think this was just very eye-opening, at least to get the thought process and the conversations rolling again, and just a gentle reminder to say all of your investigation was just very, very well done. So thank you so much. It's an honor to have you here today to present to our area. And again, I thank you so much for your time. And if you look in the chat, there's lots of thank yous on there. So Sharon, do you have anything you'd like to say? Oh no, Sharon backed in the corner. She'll talk to you later.
What was the website again?
It's all at newsday.com/ or people would say / divided, DIVIDED. So newsday.com/divided. And what you'll get there is you'll get all the stories. And if you scroll down just about one screen or two, you'll see the film, you'll see the video right there in your webpage or on your phone. And that address takes you to all the stories, and the video that you'll see is about 40 minutes.
Wonderful. And this is being recorded. So we'll send this out to all of the participants and to all of our members, as well as the information to those videos as well. So I thank you very much.
Thank you. You're all very kind. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Have a lovely day. Thank you.
Thank you all very much.